Hi, my name is Megan McGrath, and today I'll be discussing Module 12, Interpersonal Persuasion. Specifically, I'll be talking about the foot in the door persuasion strategy. It's described in our text as one that can be attributed to the style of door-to-door sales marketing that was more common in yesteryear. However, the principle still holds true for many promotion tactics used today. The theory describes how it is easier to persuade your target market to say yes once they have already agreed to a smaller task. The principle is designed around simply gaining that first agreement or the foot in the door accomplishment, and then it should be easier to get the persuaded to agree to what you were wanting to ask all along. The strategy has been studied in several applications to prove its efficacy and has been demonstrated as a compellingly useful strategy in interpersonal persuasion efforts. In each of the studies, the basic premise of the strategy remains. The researchers first asked the experiment participants to perform a small task or deed in which the majority of the group agrees. Then the experimenters ask for a second favor that the researchers actually wanted to ask all along to be performed, and it's usually a larger or more time-consuming than the first task. Researchers found that by first getting the group to agree on performing a small task, they had an easier time of asking the group to perform the larger favor compared to a control group that was only asked to perform the bigger favor. The text explains that there have been over 100 studies performed on this strategy. I'll go through about 4 of them right now. In 1966, Friedman and Fraser performed what our text described as a classic study for this persuasion theory. The observation entailed that experimenters working for a local traffic safety committee to ask drivers in California to place a small sign in their cars that said, "Be a safe driver." Then after 2 weeks of them having that in their car, the experimenters asked the same drivers to place a large and really unattractive sign in their front yards that said, "Drive carefully." In a separate control group of residents, the experimenters only asked the residents the second favor for the large, ugly sign, and they found that only 17% of the control group agreed to putting the large sign in their lawn, but 76% of the participants who initially agreed to putting the small sign up in their cars also agreed to the yard sign. Later in 1981, Riddle performed a similar experiment where he found that people were more likely to volunteer more of their time to a children's social skill project if they had initially volunteered a small amount of time to a child's actual request. Then, in 1990, our book describes the experiment that Dillard performed testing the same persuasive theory. He found that participants were more likely to volunteer to help build a hiking trail if they had first agreed to address envelopes for an environmental group excuse me, rather than if they had